So let's say we get to the main event. We get to the constitutional challenge to the individual mandate. Could you explain exactly what's at stake there? What's the nature of the challenge legally so that our listeners can understand what's going to be discussed on Monday before the court?
This isn't whether or not people like a mandate, because it's wildly unpopular and it may be bad, it is bad policy. But in terms of the Constitution, the challenge starts with what's the legal authority for this mandate.
The legal authority for Congress to pass the mandate.
To pass the mandate. And for political reasons, Congress decided to say that this is, again, it's not a tax, so we're not using our tax and spending power. We're using our power under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution to regulate interstate commerce. They're pretty committed on that front, and that made it harder for them to argue that this is a constitutional power. So the question then, if this is a power to regulate interstate commerce, is it commerce? What the opponents of the mandate have argued in court successfully in several cases already, going up to the Supreme Court, say that this is trying to compel people to enter commerce. We don't have commerce yet. There are a lot of older cases which have said—
That's because people aren't buying health insurance, so that the people who don't buy health insurance, who would be forced to buy health insurance or pay a penalty under the mandate,
Correct.
are not actually in commerce right now.
That's right, and they're being compelled to enter into and buy a private product at the command of Congress. Now, this is unusual because we've got a lot of other Commerce Clause cases in the economic regulation say, once you do anything in commerce, well, Congress can do a lot of things. So for the challenge to succeed, it has to get past those other cases without overturning them, but say this is unprecedented. It's unbounded. There's no limiting principle to say that Congress can't do anything it wants to, because everything we do indirectly could, if you were forced to enter commerce, affect then everything else in commerce, and the powers of the federal government would be more sweeping than the framers of the Constitution, or most people who understand the limits of the Constitution could have imagined.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think the court's disposition is going to turn on ultimately? We know that 4 justices who are generally considered to be liberal are likely to say that the mandate is a proper exercise of constitutional power. What sort of issues will the 5 so-called conservatives on the court be looking at?
A number of the conservative justices are very loyal to, or don't want to upset, past court precedent. So they have to say this is something different, that this is undermining the basic constitutional scheme of a balance of powers between the states, the federal government, and the people. And if we allow this to happen, or say it's constitutional, there are no boundaries whatsoever except politics as usual, which is what some of the liberal justices would be comfortable with. That's the main argument and point they need to get to, which is what's different in this. There's another part of this, which is whether it's necessary and proper. The argument has been that because Congress has the power to regulate health insurance, this is just another means to carry out and execute that legitimate power under the Commerce Clause. And the counter-argument is this is not necessary. These regulations could be enforced and executed without forcing people to buy insurance. They'd cost a lot more money, and so this is actually being done as a mandate to pay for, by having other people pay for things rather than taxing them, what is a regulation which just imposes a lot of costs. The other part is it's not proper because this has never been done before. This would overturn the constitutional structure and the balance of powers between the states, federal government, and the people. That may well be the decisive argument finally. If the court says, this just doesn't look right, we've allowed a lot of things, we've said a lot of things are constitutional, this goes over the line, and if we're going to have a constitution, we have to maintain some boundary lines of enumerated powers.
Now, some conservative justices like to defer to legislative bodies. Is that going to be an issue in this case?
To a degree, or defer to the politics as usual. That's correct. I mean, this is a big step where no matter what decision you reach, it's going to be unpopular with a large portion of the public. More people than not probably would like to see the mandate go. That's what all the polling indicates. The justices are going to look at this in terms of how they think about the law, though, not how they think about politics. They may kind of look over their shoulder a little bit, but they have their own particular way of approaching the case, and they're not all the same.
Which are the justices you think are going to be most important on the challenge to the mandate?
The most important justice, as usual on the swing, is Justice Kennedy. He's had a number of strong opinions upholding the important role of federalism and the structure of powers between the states and the federal government. That may not be the only criteria he brings to the case, but that suggests that he'll be sensitive to those type of arguments. Justice Scalia, many people think, is going to be deferential to the past precedent in a case involving homegrown marijuana, said, well, the federal government can regulate that. That can be distinguished, and I think he will, as a particular narrow example, and I think most folks think he'll come on board. Justice Roberts is another, Chief Justice Roberts is another cautious judge who maybe not exclusively, but think about how this opinion can be understood by the public, and we don't want to replay what looks like a Bush versus Gore. It's a political decision, not a constitutional decision. These are very, superb lawyers, jurists. They will try to explain this in terms that fit into the larger context of constitutional law and history. It's a tough job, and it could well be a 5-4 decision in either direction.
Well, Tom, I'm sure that you and I, along with the rest of the country, will be looking forward to seeing what happens on Monday.
Yes, we will.